All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and we are super excited, Ben, because we are now entering winter series where we get to listen to the stories of our people who have been listening to us for some time and implementing this stuff in the real world. But before we get there, mate, welcome to you.
Oh, mate, I cannot be more excited because we get to not only just be the fly on the wall, but we get to ask the questions and we get that immediate feedback in terms of how people are taking action, all of the things that they're implementing. So winter series, our summer series, some of the best work we get to do because we get that instant feedback in terms of how people are implementing our frameworks and our sort of education that we pass on. So, mate, I'm pumped. Can't wait to get into the show.
Me neither. So we have got a cracker to start today, a TPC listener who's got a wonderful story to share. So let's have a little listen to the conversation you and I recently had with our TPC listener.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, Ben, very special guest today. It's an exciting part of the year for you and I where we get to chat to our listeners, those folks who are brave enough to put their hands up and say they want to tell their story to our community. Today, we are chatting with Adam Crane. Welcome to the Property Couch, Adam.
G'day, boys. How you going?
We're doing pretty well. Looking forward to chatting to you today, but we've got a lot to cover. You've been a brave soul to say, listen, I want to tell my story and see if there's anything in it that could be of benefit to the community. So let's get to know you, Adam. Let's take it back to the beginning. Tell us a bit of a story about conversations around money growing up over the dinner table for you.
Yeah, so money was sort of interesting in my household in that it was spoken about sort of freely, but you know, I didn't know sort of what dad earned or I didn't know anything like that. Like incomes and things like that were very much kept away from the dinner table, but the actual value of money itself was, yeah, it was interesting. You got a sense, especially, so my dad worked full time and my mum, I often say, is a domestic engineer. She looked after the house. She kept it going. And while dad was the breadwinner, mum definitely was the key of sort of making it stretch. So she was very good at, she made bread at home in the early days. I remember that. Our big overseas holidays was over the bridge to Phillip Island. Things like that. So money was definitely sort of around. We did, lots of the usual sort of things. If I mowed the lawns, that was $20. You put the bins out, it was $5. And if you wanted anything, you definitely got that delayed gratification.
$5 to put the bins out?
Oh, mate.
What, $20 to mow the lawn? How long ago was this?
Yeah, I know. No. Dad hated the lawn. So definitely that's where I learnt my ability of negotiation.
We've got an inflation problem in our community.
There it is.
Trust me, duck down to my parents' place in Wanturna, mate. They'll get it all sorted for you. A couple of bin runs and stuff.
I'm going down to mow the lawn.
That's it. Mate, straight down there. You'll have it all sorted. Don't stress. It's all good. But no, it wasn't bad. I was fortunate enough that anything I did want didn't take too long to sort of get my hands on it because luckily I wasn't trying to save for a Ferrari or anything. But it's all good. Got there eventually.
I can tell you that I'm not going to let my kids listen to this episode because they don't get $5 bins out.
Yeah, mate, I was just as shocked when my brother told me his kids were getting notes instead of coins for teeth. So trust me, I'm on the same page.
Oh wow, yeah, that's big.
Absolutely.
So you didn't speak freely about incomes, but you obviously got to model what it was look like for your mum to make it stretch. What about budgeting? Did you observe what was the budgeting observations?
Yeah, absolutely. So mum and dad, same sort of thing. Whilst they weren't sort of open about it, but there was very much sort of a jar system that sort of existed in the background of some sort. Definitely growing up, you could sort of see, big purchases. So if you wanted a big Lego set, for instance, that was, the money for that's on your birthday. And things like that alluded to some sort of jar system. I mean, I've never actually admittedly sat down and asked them, but there definitely was some sort of that, that's for gas and electricity, and you don't need that, and we don't buy that, and if you want something like that, you have to sort of wait. So there was some sort of, as you guys often call it, the jar system or envelope system that existed, but it wasn't something you physically saw in the house. It was just more something that was you could decipher through the conversations that were happening around you.
And what about the coaching? Sounds like mum's obviously the home economist, which is awesome.
Yep.
Teaching you about decisions when you're earning this pocket money, how to go about spending that and focusing in on those types of value decisions. How did that evolve into that particular story?
Yeah, so especially like once I got like a proper job, so like my brother, so I'm a middle child, I've got an older brother and a younger sister, and we all started working 9 months. Like Dad's a very hard worker, we inherited that sort of skill and that sort of thing. And what the good thing was is that everyone was on the same page in that when you started working, the rule of thumb was that for every dollar you saved, Dad'd match it and put it towards a car when you turned 18. So everyone got the same incentive package. Everyone was and that was sort of the very fundamental, like the foundation of sort of how we treated money in the household. You didn't buy your first car on a loan. We didn't get credit cards. We didn't do anything like that because it wasn't like my old man sat me down and sort of said, oh, debt is bad, but it was just sort of, we don't do that. That you don't borrow money to get things that aren't going to make money or go up or anything like that. So cars and things, no loans, nothing. All of us, we were all on the same path.
And did you know the backstory on the mortgage itself? Did your parents buy, were they steadfast on being debt free on their property?
So Dad's a property investor. Oh, Mum and Dad, sorry. My mother will kill me for saying that. But yeah, Mum and Dad are investors. Dad was fortunate enough, he works in the tech space. So he the early beginning of our childhood, our overseas trips were to Phillip Island. Then sort of in my teen years, we started driving to Queensland. And I remember, fond memories of that sort of thing. And then for my sister's 21st birthday, we actually celebrated it in Vegas. So Dad's career sort of definitely grew. Once again, no idea on incomes or anything like that. But at some stage, Mum and Dad started becoming investors themselves, and now they've got a handful that they keep sort of in the background.
Can I double click on that, because this is a really important lesson here, right?
Yep.
It's about living within your means. Like there's there's so much gold just in what you've talked about, right? The first bit is basically living within your means, understanding the value of a dollar, in terms of what that story looks like. And then as the wealth is building, you gave us a clue that your mum and dad started investing in property. Guess what? The actual experiences got a little bit more lavish, but again, all modelled on delayed gratification and the ability to be able to afford it. A lot of the challenges we have with society today is this expectation and this on-demand need that I deserve this and I don't care if I have to borrow money to have a nice experience, because I just get inundated with influencers and people doing amazing things and I want that now. I'm entitled to that now, as opposed to, you said your dad was a hard worker, your mum did a great job of looking after the home. There's so much gold in that, Bryce, isn't there?
Oh, heaps. And I'm super fascinated to know what the 21st looked like for you. If your sister's in Vegas, your older brother was in probably Phillip Island. Where were you? Did you get somewhere in the middle?
I was the typical sort of 21-year-old where I was like, don't worry, Mum and Dad, I'll just invite 50 of my closest friends to the house. And I think after about 130 turned up, my mum was going to murder me. So I was the one that pushed the envelope. So I think Dad was like, easy way to avoid a lot of liability here. If we take it overseas, it's just us. So I think I was the catalyst, if anything else. But, you get that.
Hey, so Ben's right. There's so much in that, right? So, can we lean in on the dollar match? Like, there's three of you that you said same incentive package. Interesting, interesting, because we know you're in sales, right? So,
yeah, that's it.
How did everyone respond to that with your older brother and your younger sister and you? Did you all lean into that, or did one of you take advantage of that more than the other?
Yeah, I got cut off. So I was fortunate enough to be a little bit more frugal than my older brother, and definitely more than my younger sister. My younger sister, I'm pretty sure she's supporting the Australian economy at this stage. But yeah, I actually got to a point where my dad cut me off. So I think I got to about $4,000 in savings, and he said, "Righto, at $8,000 you can buy a great car, mate. You've got heaps. That's it. It's not an unlimited fountain of money." So my brother took advantage of it. He didn't make too much of a mockery of it. I got cut off, and my sister, I think she sort of scraped some pennies together in her last year of working before she turned 18. So yeah, so some of us benefited more than the others, but
You didn't lean
that
in
was
on the
it.
lack of detail on that ceiling there. You just the dollar matched. You
Yeah,
didn't tell you in advance it was
It's
4,000.
100% return. Where do you get 100% return?
exactly.
Like,
Exactly. I should have started a share portfolio, but that's okay. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so there's some really good lessons here from your mum, from your
Yep.
dad, some incentive packages that meant that you lent in. So you
Yep.
get to independence age, whether that's 18, 21, 24, but wherever it is.
Yep.
What are some of the things that are happening when you're starting to get your first paycheck, you're starting to get your first taste of freedom?
Yep.
Is that spilling over into that next phase of your life, or are you getting a bit looser on the cash?
Oh, it was sort of a balance of both, to be 100% honest with you. The first sort of bits and pieces, your first paycheck, I bought a blue velvet chair that I could put all my hats on. It was the most outrageous purchase that I think I could buy, but that was what I always wanted. I wanted a hand chair for my bedroom. But then after a sort of a little while of enjoying it, it definitely something stuck. Definitely something stuck because I just took some of my paycheck and put it away. Now, it wasn't sort of a fixed amount. There wasn't sort of any sort of systematic approach to it. But I definitely, that was when I sort of discovered that I liked having money and that it started sort of playing with my mental state. Now, at 18, I definitely wasn't going, oh, my mental well-being is, affected by my bank account. But there was a link, and I knew that if something came up and I didn't want to miss out on it, I needed to have money in case I had to buy tickets, or I had to go somewhere, or I had to, book a plane ride somewhere or anything like that. I didn't want to miss out. So it's almost as if FOMO fed my savings in a weird way.
Is there something in that around an asset that you bought, obviously this velvet chair thing, as opposed to experiences? Were you learning that lesson quite early in the piece to sort of say, sounds like those experiences were more value to you, they created much more joy and happiness for you, as opposed to the material thing that you thought was potentially going to do that? So if that's the case, you've learned a lesson, a very positive lesson very early on in the piece.
Yeah. So I think when I was about 16 or 17, we did a family trip to Thailand. That was our first trip abroad. Dad's career obviously had started to take a little bit, and I got my first taste of travel, and that was that hook, line, and sinker. We went to Thailand, and I just remember being absolutely floored by the different standards of living. I just couldn't believe it. But also that sort of, I got a little bit of my mother's side in me, in that I definitely like a stop and drop holiday. So we got over there, we sat next to a pool for 10 days and, walked around a bit and saw some statues and got a bit of culture. And that was when I got sort of hook, line, and sinker. So yeah, it moved away from assets and things like that, and just sort of started being like, well, I'm 18 now. I can travel. I'm allowed to legally travel on my own. I can go and have a holiday in that. And my partner then at the time was very similar, had never been overseas, and that was it. I started saving for holidays.
Adam, in terms of the what you did see in Thailand, how much was that culture shock for you around seeing the level of difference in standard of living, and like you're in a resort, it's all fancy and all that, but obviously when you go to some of the back parts, or where the people actually live, and you see the conditions that they're living in, the quality, the standards, how much of that impacted you in terms of your understanding of how fortunate we are here in Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty wild, to be honest with you. I think the power lines. The thing that I think of when I think of Thailand, I think of the power lines, because if anyone hasn't been there that's listening, they have 40, 50 electrical leads all mounted on a pole, all next to each other, which just seems ludicrous to me. And someone climbing along them and maintaining them, and I don't know, it just seems so dangerous. But that was, and then you look at, there's a lot of rubbish, and the drinking water, you're not drinking out of the taps, and especially how much, sort of buying something from someone seems to change their whole outlook on a day. That, when I think of that sort of travel experience, that's definitely what rings true the most, is just, and the rubbish. Like, I just remember the litter around the place, and I just thought to myself, that's something I don't even consider back here. It's just, everywhere's clean. You just don't think of it.
Yeah, we're incredibly fortunate. So
yeah, absolutely.
So with those as some formative experiences, what does money mean to you now, and what did it mean to you as you were experiencing that exposure to travel? That's what I want to spend a bit of time in. Has it changed? How has it changed, and what does it mean to you now?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, it's as you get older, it's funny, your expenses definitely seem to go up a little bit. Moving out of the land of the living at mum and dad's house, it's amazing how much gas and water and electricity and rates and things start to add up, and how the $20 for the lawns definitely doesn't stretch as far. But money now these days, it's still the same. It's fun, like the foundation side of it, funnily enough, is exactly the same. If my bank account looks good, I sleep better. And I've definitely sort of spent the last sort of few weeks knowing that I was coming on here, sort of reflecting on sort of how money these days, it's not necessarily about the amount anymore. It's just whether there's enough there, and whether or not I can make it last and do what I need to do. And then if I can do the things I want to do on top of that, that's good. But it's definitely been sort of identifying, it's probably, ironically of all things, it was your platform that sort of highlighted discretionary versus, essential. It's funny, you don't think of a lot of your expenses like that until it gets put in front of you. And I think that's a very realistic sort of approach to it, that you sort of look at things and you go, right, interest rates at the moment are going up. You're sort of going, okay, it's interesting. You start looking at the discretionary column and you're going, it is discretionary. I don't have to have it if I don't want to have it. Like, it's funny. So money's sort of changed in that, especially with a platform like yours, it gives me the ability to just not to be silly. I can look at it very objectively now and just go, right, this is that is what I need versus that is what I want, and then just sort of work it back from there.
Has that been a bit of an adjustment for you? Because to give context to everyone listening to this, you're 32, Adam.
Yep.
And so the entirety of your life has been around a wonderful period of economic prosperity in this country, whereas, the old fellas here, we grew up in the 70s, so we went through the recession we had to have, right? So we've had some disparity, but so you just said, well, I've never had to think about that in terms of discretionary and essential, and there's a whole bunch of folks that are having the same conversation or experience or thoughts in their mind where they haven't had to do that as well. So it's interesting for you to how much of an adjustment has that been? Like, in terms of, all right, I do actually have to work out which is important spending and which is not.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like, when I bought my first and only property, my interest rate was about 5.6. 5.6-ish, around that mark or anything like that. And so I saw a snippet, but I won't lie to you, I reckon it stayed at that rate for 3 months, maybe, not even. And then we started to go down. And so I remember it being like that, definitely. But the adjustment has been definitely interesting. I definitely enjoyed and indulged a little bit the last few years, I'm not going to lie to you. I was fortunate enough to stay employed over sort of all the things that happened in the world in the last few years. But at the same time, I definitely got suckered into the whole, while this is all happening. I'm in Melbourne in Australia, so we had some of the harshest lockdowns, obviously. And I definitely indulged a little bit on the online spend, but at the same time, it's been a lesson trying to then unlearn that, because I was quite frugal for a number of years. Then I sort of had a life-changing sort of experience happen, and then I sort of went, well, I've been frugal for a long time, I'm going to enjoy myself a little bit, and now it's trying to rein it back in.
You talk about that life-changing lesson. Let's sort of see whether we can join the dots in terms of getting there. So you've had experiences, you've travelled overseas, you now have, what I have, which is the travel bug. You love travelling around, getting those cultural experiences and life lessons, and again, reminding ourselves how fortunate we are in this great country. So take us through those formative young adult years as you're coming through, building out that time. You had a girlfriend at the time. Take us through that particular story and where it got you to.
Yeah, so as I was growing up, you sort of start looking around and thinking, no, it's all good and fun. You want someone to share it with. So I had a partner for a long-term relationship. Ended up getting engaged when I was 25, and I was divorced by 27. So that was sort of an interesting sort of thing in my whole perspective of sort of how life worked. My parents have been married 40 plus years. My brother's been married over 10. Divorce wasn't something that really sort of existed in my world. As you grew up, I very much modeled my sort of career and my personal life on my old man. You got married, you had kids, you worked hard, you put a roof over their heads, you put them in good schools, and you treated them to life experiences and you helped them out where you can. And I was sort of building my life in the same way. So I built a career as a salesman pretty early on. I was at university studying to be an architect, but that didn't quite pan out. Sort of fell into a sales role and then just sort of took off from there. I just sort of found my way and stumbled my way through building a career and saving for my first house. And then, bought a house, and 10 months later I was divorced.
Oh wow! Okay, so there's a bit there, right? So can we lean into the paradigm shift for you? There's no family tree of divorce, and yet everyone around you is in at face value successful relationships, but you're facing divorce. How did you navigate that for people who are listening to this now, who are able to resonate with you, that life event has come to them and they weren't expecting it to be that way?
Yeah, and it was sort of it's hard in that I think the trickiest part about it is what you don't read about is the loneliness that you experience in that sort of time frame. It doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on. If I didn't see it coming. It just the rug was ripped out from underneath me, and it's a disorientating feeling in that you guys often talk about the big rocks in the jar. I thought I had them. I had the first home. I had the career going. I had in my book I'd really started sort of ticking things off and flipping the pages over. But then all of a sudden for that to change, well, if you've built your career to build your family home, because then you're married, all of a sudden it's just it didn't matter which sort of way you looked at it. I felt like everything I'd worked for had been removed, which in hindsight, looking back, it wasn't really like that. Unfortunately, it is an event, and fortunately enough, I was actually listening to you guys at the time, and you'd had a recent episode. Bryce, without even realizing it, you won't realize, but you were talking about in the episode about how you don't negotiate a conversation like that from a point of weakness, you do it from a point of strength. So that helped me sort of move through my divorce in that I started to look at things objectively. Like, it hurt, but I had to sort of box that up and move it aside and navigate through the divorce as best as I could. And then you sort of start to step back and you go, right, well, who's on my side? And in a weird way, even though we didn't necessarily know each other, I sort of felt like, right, I've got someone in my corner. So then you start to build on that little piece. So then I was like, right, I don't feel good. So how do I feel better? So I started to exercise more and look after myself a little bit more. And you just sort of gain the 1% back first. And then it sort of comes. And I think where I was a little bit confused in that portion of my life was I was looking for the big change first, and it wasn't there. And so that's where you start to find out a little bit of the essence of yourself. It's the loneliness.
What does that mean, the big change first?
So I was looking for, like I was going to wake up the next day and just feel all of a sudden euphoric and I was over it and it didn't matter and, oh, the path in front was going to be really clear. Like, oh, you just do this and then you move on to this bit and off you go. And it just doesn't exist in that point because you'd built so much up to that part of your life. Unfortunately, you have to go all the way back and start again.
But it is resilient building, and it also proves to you that you can recover from such an event, right? I mean, I've had one sort of very early on relationship breakdown, and yeah, you have those moments, don't you, where you think, what's all this all about, and how do I get back on my feet and recover? And it sounds like you've gone through that program. And I tell you what, when you get out the other side of it, it takes a while, but you start to feel and you look back and you think, well, at the end of the day, I'm now in control of what my destiny looks like. And when do you think for you that sort of came about? Because I know, you mentioned that holding on to the property was a really important thing as part of that story. Was that part of that sort of confidence building process that you then went through?
Yeah, absolutely. That was probably when I sort of started to really lean into the money smart system and sort of what you guys preach, because I needed some structure. I operate in the land of structure. It just suits me better. So then I had to concede a lot of things in order to retain that property, which wasn't a lot of fun. When you move out of home, you think that's it. I'm done. I'm never going back to mum and dad's. I'm an adult. I'm at the ripe old age of 27. I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet. And I found myself 3 months later at mum and dad's in my old bedroom but in hindsight, looking back now, that was the best thing I had to do. Like, yeah, I took a hit on probably my confidence, moving back with mum and dad. But once you sort of started to sit down and really nut it out on a piece of paper, it started to change, things like recycling costs to go in and back out. I had a first home buyers grant that I took advantage of. So I didn't pay stamp duty. So then, to go out and then back in just to settle and to get the whole clean slate feeling, was it really worth it? Well, once you sort of penciled it in, it would take me, I remember having like a formula on a piece of paper somewhere saying, oh, it'll take me 3.6 years to recycle and get back to the same point. Or I just suck it up, take my pride and move into mum and dad's and rent it out. And it probably wasn't until about 12 months later that the feeling like, oh, the bank's going to take the house and blah, 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 blah. Because I was leveraged to the hilt to make that work. But all of a sudden renting it out, it gave me enough breathing room to survive sort of the first 12 months. And then I was lucky enough to sort of get a change in my career and I got paid a little bit more. But it's just, you don't see that when you're in the event, you know what I mean? It takes time. And I think that's sort of part of your guys' message as well. If you can buy time, you don't know what you can't see. And that was what sort of helped.
Yeah, I mean, it highlights that you went for the harder solution, because a lot of people would just tap out, mate. But by doing the numbers and working out basically the recycle costs and the losses and how much that would set you back, you made another smart decision when it comes to money management and when it comes to your future. So there's not too many things that I'm looking at in your story that I'm saying that isn't going right for you. You're built on a really good foundation. You've got good systems and processes. You're plan driven. You're looking to, your future pacing in regards to the goals and everything that you're setting. And, when a roadblock or a detour presents itself, which was unexpected for you, you were able to navigate through when others might have, again, because it's harder, have tapped out. And that basically means that you're in a far better position today than what those other people will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just sort of one of those things. I've got sort of my own sort of mantra on it, but I also measure something called sleep at night tax, and things that if I can't live with the outcome, because I'm going to lose sleep over it, then it's not worth it, because obviously your sleep's the key vital thing. If you have a good night's sleep, you can make a lot better emotional decisions the following day. So I try not to lose too much sleep over things, and I measure a lot of things in sleep tax. How much will it cost me? And and that was one of the things I kept repeating to myself, like, ultimately, if I didn't retain the property, especially sort of following my old man, investments are important, and you can sort of start to see it build. It just didn't make sense. I was going to lose sleep over it for years. So I had to make it work. And yeah,
So you
as I said,
compromised, you sacrificed, and you got through it. Well done.
yeah. So
Can you give us a little further peel behind the curtain there, Adam? Because there's someone listening to this right now who is going through a relationship challenge, breakup. Did you say to your ex-wife that, hey, I'll buy out your share, and then that's where you had to leverage up enough, and then to make it work you had to move home? Can you, to the extent that you want to share, what did some of the mechanics look like for that?
yeah, so it's you've ultimately sort of, I mean, being a salesman as well, I've sort of managed to read the room a little bit, and it's sort of you've got to. It's easy to say, much harder to practice. But you've got to try and bring the objectiveness into it as best as you can. So obviously there can sometimes be a little bit of venom that sort of exists because you're going through something quite pivotal. But I always tried to sort of bring it back to, well, what can you not live with, and what can I not live with? Like what is the point in which we sort of negotiate? These are the things we want to do, and this is, everyone always wants to do better than the other in that sort of scenario, as much as you don't want to admit it. But when you actually sit down and, I sort of said, well, do you want to live in the house? And I was fortunate enough that she said, nah, it's not in a place that I want to live. I want to move away. I can't see myself with it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I want to retain it, whether I live in it or rent it out or whatever. It's important to me. It was a big milestone for me, blah, blah, blah. And, we managed to sort of negotiate on that, but it definitely took time, and it's hard to, like, I don't make any lightness of it. It's hard to keep communication open, but I think if you're honest, I think that's the easiest way to sort of navigate those things. Sit down objectively and just say, this is what I can't live with myself knowing if I'd pass this up or not this or whatever. The rest of the things are on the table. So I wasn't attached to the furniture and things like that, because it just didn't hold value to me, but it held a lot of value to her. So, once you sort of identify that, well, then you can have an open and honest conversation. Okay, well, what do you see yourself having? Oh, I want this, this, and this. No worries. I'd like this. And so then that's all of a sudden, through very murky waters, we started to come up with something that we could both live with, and once again the sleep at night tax came into it. I didn't want to completely ruin her life. That wasn't what it was about. It was about just finding the most amicable solution you can in a pretty nasty environment, and that's the tricky part.
Incredible. Hey, and I know we're in very sensitive territory here.
Yep.
4 years after that divorce now, so that was when you were 28. Have you reconciled where the relationship did break down? Was it money related? Was it goals and plans related? Or, is that something you're happy to talk about?
Yeah, look, there was some elements to it that I'll sort of keep private to protect the parties that are interested. But it's, unfortunately, whilst I say that I didn't see the divorce coming, it's one of the things that I reflect back now, and I see, the 50% play I had in it. I think it takes a bigger person to look back at a scenario like that and say, yep, there may or may not have been things that sort of happened that you don't really want to sort of ever revisit again, and you hope doesn't happen again. But at the same time, you have to put your hand up in a scenario like that. It's a teamwork environment. Doesn't matter which side of the fence you land on. Even if you're the one that doesn't see it coming, it definitely was a contributor to that happening. But at the same token, it's as much bad that happened and things like that as well. It's been good in that have grown exponentially sort of from that event in that, and she's moved on and had a family and done those sorts of things, which is good for her and all that sort of stuff. And at the same token, I've gone off on my own path in a similar sort of scenario where I've traveled more and I've explored, and really found a lot more out about myself, which has then led to just a number of opportunities as well. So it's you've got to sort of step back and just go, it happened, it is what it is. But I think in the hindsight, and it's definitely a good thing.
Oh, and incredible transparency from you. And I think one of the traits that I'm observing from you, and from my experience, I don't have any experience in divorce, so I'm a pretender here. But when you see someone say, "My fault. What was my responsibility? How can I take action on my half of it?" That is an incredible character trait for you to move forward. So I can't imagine that was a great time for you at all. But look, as we use that as a backdrop, what is the call for you then? Like, because you've gone through a bit as a 32-year-old that you've just described to us, and it meant that you tried to hold on to this property, which you've successfully done. So what's the vision now? What are we working towards? What is it? What have you learnt those lessons for, and what does it mean you're going to be doing going forward? Probably this question is from a financial perspective, but you can let it go wherever you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, after the divorce, it just sort of took a bit of time to sort of sit back and go, right. Leading up to it, I was quite frugal. I was very good at saving my pennies and all that sort of stuff. I had, we leading up to that point, I saved a lot of money to put down a good first deposit for the home. Then we had obviously a wedding and stuff, which we paid for all in cash. So I wasn't carrying phenomenal amounts of debt, which was good. So that sort of set me up so that once I got to mum and dad's, I just had to let the loans ride a little bit until I sort of figured out exactly what you're saying. I just needed to say, okay, well, what does it look like, and what am I trying to build to? So I stuck very much. I think that was about the time when your book came out, your first book. So I sat down and read that and thought, $2,000 a month sounds pretty good. We can start with that and we can move on from there. So then same sort of thing.
2,000 a week even.
2,000 a week, sorry. Yes, yeah, true. I mean, I wasn't a good scholar. I did say I didn't become an architect, but we're getting there. And so I just started to say, okay, so what does that look like? Like, how do I get to that point? And the biggest sort of probably the thing that stood out the most was I'm on my own now. Most people do it with dual incomes. How do I make a second income? It was as simple as that for me. I just doesn't matter which way I looked at it. If you want to be a dual income household, no dramas. I can be dual income. I'll just do it myself. So then I started to get on the hunt of, well, what does that look like? Like, how do you start to piece together? If I see myself with, I had the golden number of 5 properties in my head, including a PPE, a primary residence. So then I started to think, okay, to move towards that, even if you have dual income, and I saw myself sort of moving on and meeting someone else and all that sort of stuff, but making it more sort of reliable on myself, rather than going, okay, I need 2 incomes to make this work. I need 2, etc., because, I want to have kids and things like that. So if I could just be the dual income, then maybe that would lead me down the path of where I wanted to be.
And how has that evolved? Is there a side hustle that's currently in play?
Yeah, so I was, whilst I was at mum and dad's, I started to sort of save up, and then I had an opportunity to move out, so to where I'm living at the moment, and but still not extend myself too crazily. So I managed to sort of trap a little bit of surplus, and as I was accumulating the surplus, it was more to buy a second property, which I actually haven't ended up buying just yet. But I had an opportunity that I was always open to doing a business of some sort. So at first I was going to own a cafe, which luckily I didn't do before a pandemic because they suffered the most. And then I was one of those people that just everything I looked at, I just sort of was like, I wonder if that could be a business. And then luckily, because I'd been trapping surplus the whole time, I had an opportunity come up, like in importing and things like that. So I had enough of a nest egg that when I approached this company to buy their product, ironically for myself, I then spoke to them and just sort of said, oh, how do I get it here in Australia? And they said, we don't have an Australian dealer. And all of a sudden, it just snapped into
You
line.
do now.
Yeah, exactly. I know a sales guy that can do importing. That's easy. But once again, if I hadn't had the systems and the processes, I would have had to scratch the initial order together, which was about 30 grand. But because because I was saving and always saving, just going, well, eventually I'm going to either buy a property or buy stocks or buy something that will then generate more income. I definitely thought that the dual income side of it would come from the property aspect. I didn't see myself being, working actively in a business. And then all of a sudden it just sort of lined up. I put the first order in, and now I'm still working full time. But I've also got a project on the side that I'm trying to sort of grow, and hopefully one day that'll be a contributing factor to my income.
Oh, come on, let's give it a plug. What is it?
So I import and distribute a brand called Sonic Tools, which is, you can have a look at garagetools.com.au. That's all the products.
Garagetools.com.au. Okay, we'll get people looking at that, see if we can help you out in that space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, where I want to go with the conversation, Adam, from my point of view, is you mentioned earlier some of the tools that you use, and you did mention the More platform.
Yep.
And so what I'm keen to sort of understand is when you saw the Money Smart system and you basically saw the platform, what has it done for you in terms of allowing you to get organised? Because you're an organised, I can't be what I can't see type person. Take us through some of the sort of key takeaways for you in terms of the value that it's adding for your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll probably be one of the minorities that'll say it's a double-edged sword a little bit, because I got obsessed. The first time I got it, I got absolutely chronically obsessed. So this was back when it was on the TPC website, and I started getting obsessed with the surplus number to see whether or not, I could push that. I could get a little bit higher. And it tapped into a bad place of being too frugal. So I'm definitely a big advocate as well for a poor man pays twice, in that, you don't buy the worst pair of shoes that you can buy that are the cheapest. You buy good shoes, you buy a good pillow, and you have those things for a long time, because it's one of those things. But I started to err on that, buying very, not very helpful items, but they were cheap, and that would buy me 3 months before I had to buy another purchase. And I just don't, I went a little bit too far the other way. But
quality matters, eh?
Yeah, exactly. So, some things, quality does matter. You know what I mean? It's Don't get me wrong. You don't go and buy out the most expensive thing of everything you look at. But yeah, I definitely got a little too obsessed of being frugal. But it's great to sort of be able to sit down and lay it all out. And then especially with the new features like with Money Stretch and all that sort of stuff, it's nice to be able to, it wasn't the intended way you built it for, people I would assume would mainly use it for if you're having children. What does it look like when you take one income out? Well, I use it in if I switch from full-time work to my business, how long can I survive? That's the adaptation I use it for, because eventually that point I can see it coming. I can't see exactly when it's coming, but hopefully sometime next year I can see that pivot switching. And so that's a good tool to be able to sit down and go, if I want to scrape my pennies together for 12 months, how much do I need to make it work?
And can I double click on the essential and discretionary story? Even in the essential side, like groceries, were you challenging yourself in terms of what part of the grocery spend was actually a pleasure piece as opposed to an essential food for energy, food for health type piece as well? Did you get it? When you're talking about gamifying, we've got people on the platform who are going hard in terms of looking at things like ice creams and confectionaries and all of those other, and now also in terms of, I don't know whether they've been watching, but cereal prices have been going through the roof, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of, rather than sort of doing the brand names and now sort of moving to the generic supermarket brand names, because the reality is, we've been smacked in terms of cost of living pressures. Have you sort of played around with that a lot?
Definitely. And if there's one person on the planet that knows that spaghetti bolognese can last you 4 meals, you're looking at him. Like I got obsessed. I could find things you could build in bulk. And perhaps that was what led to my divorce, too much spaghetti bolognese. But that I found like for that 6-month window there, it was chronic. You wouldn't have found one light switch that was on in my household that didn't have a person sitting in the room. And most of the time we were sitting in darkness anyway. Like it just got.
Maybe we'll listen to this,
a
Ben.
onesie.
We'll just edit the bits that they can listen to.
So
you discovered a onesie, you sit on the couch, you don't turn the heater on, you just stay in your onesie.
Oh,
because
mate.
it's saving gas. There's plenty of people who do it, and they're better for it over the long term.
Absolutely.
Except for when it starts to, affect relationships.
Yeah. So it was good. So yeah, I did gamify it. It definitely became one of those things where like saving money was a hobby, which is probably weird and outlandish to say out loud. But I feel like if there's ever a judgment-free podcast, I'm probably sitting in it. But it's well,
it's not a problem, Adam. It's not a problem during accumulation phase. It's only a problem when you switch over to having the rewards for the hard work and the success. If you can't switch over, because the whole reason you do it is to provide yourself with a lifestyle. We've talked about that on the podcast here, the frugality inertia. It's only a problem if at some point in the future it's so rusted and bolted on in your mind that you can't actually switch to the fruits. But in accumulation phase, knock yourself out.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's definitely also one of those things, and that's probably where I brought the sleep tax in that while being frugal is fantastic and all that sort of stuff, I have to let myself enjoy some things, because or else I'm so wound up and can't get the respite from my own mind that then it starts to I don't quite know how to articulate it, to be 100% honest with you. You just feel like you're making slightly worse decisions because you're so tightly wound. So that's also where the platform's good, because you can build in a token holiday in whatever that is, and you can then go away guilt-free for that weekend or that week or that 2 weeks or whatever you've built into it, and you can actually sort of live with yourself a little bit in that you sort of say, right, this is what I work for. This is why I work so hard. This is what I'm trying to build, so that I can go away. And recently I went away to Halls Gap with my partner, and it was good. Did we do anything crazy and expensive and exciting? No, but it was we just reset. That's all it needed, and and it was built into that platform so that I don't have to go away and go, far out, I shouldn't be doing this. This is money that could be this and that, but $1,000 over 30 years, how much does it move the needle?
Well, to put it, has wealth speed allowed you to also look at it in that context as well? Because ultimately, you're then measuring at each, your wealth is accumulating on an hourly rate, right? So a lot of people, when you start to then say, well, what does that $500 short trip weekend away do for me? It really doesn't have much of an impact when it comes to your overall wealth speed. And if you, again, bake it in terms of your 12-month planning, do it. I mean, we enjoyed record low interest rates and a lot of government stimulus. And obviously conditions in businesses were more broadly, obviously, except for recreational and cafes and so forth, what you were talking about, were impacted. But a lot of people did take that opportunity, and they're still taking that opportunity in those savings that they build up to go on those types of holidays, and that's obviously the inflationary element of it now. But when times are good, you've got to reward yourself. But when times and cycles move, you've just got to start to think about where you're currently sitting in that particular program. And to your point, Adam, you were saying earlier, always from your sleep tax test, it's like, I can sleep at night knowing that I've got an ample buffer for X, and I also know that I'm charging towards an outcome, which is about potentially going full-time into my side hustle and doing those types of things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of... And that's the wealth speed. It's tricky. It's gamified it again a little bit, which is dangerous. Like it's the double-edged sword. You seem to like. I start to break free of the chains that you've sort of got a stranglehold on my bank account, and then you bring something else in, and I go, I could have a go at that as well. And
Can I just say, it's not, for people like you,
Yeah.
we didn't design it so much for people like you. There's basically 95% of the population out there who have got a problem with taking action, and they have no clue. Like, they're not problem aware. They have no clue basically in terms of how lazy their money is, the fact that they're not producing any productivity out of the surplus that they're making. And so I understand that was our challenge when you put something in the marketplace that caters for this 95% of people who really could improve their wealth speed, and really could make their money work harder for them, because they work hard to get it, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's just wasted. For people like you, you're in that 5% of people who are disciplined, are organised, are coordinated, and you run your money to a system, i.e., money smarts, in terms of it's a rules-based system. It's very easy to operate. So I'm sorry that it's become a double-edged sword for you.
That's all right. It's all good. But at the same token, you have to tip your hat as well, because, like, for instance, the part of the platform where you can go in and have a look at sort of how you compare in your age group in certain categories and things like that.
Yeah, money fit.
Yeah, it's nice because like some of my friends, we sort of touch on, sort of how things are going and all that sort of stuff. But those are not really open and candid sort of conversations I'm having in sort of my social aspects. So that what it does is it manages to tick that box for me, in that I get to sort of have a look. It's, as you said, it's anonymous. You can't see who the other people are that you're having a look at. But it's been good in that I could sort of have a peep show and sort of go, right, I can get off my own case a little bit in that regard, because I'm doing all right. I'm in X amount of percentile for that. And it's good in that regard. If you feel, I am a very vocal person. I like to whatever's in my head comes out my mouth, much to the displeasure of probably my missus. She probably hates that about me, but it's nice because I can't scratch that itch in my social circle. So it's nice to be able to sort of scratch that itch using the platform to sort of say, right, well, how am I traveling with this? And my grocery's a little crazy at the moment. Where am I at? Like, it's been good to just to have a tinker and play with it.
Can I ask a question around, because part of the reason why we start with, what was money being discussed around the dinner table and so forth, is because we do want people to eventually start to have conversations with their besties and their friends around money, because it is such a sensitive and emotional topic that the more people can actually have open conversations around, it's a bit like mental health, right? 5 or 10 years ago, you'd never show anyone or tell anyone you're having struggles or anything like that. But now it's starting to become more accepted. Bryce and I are on a mission to try and make sure that we can have some dialogue in terms of, what are you doing about this type of thing? And what are you doing about this type of thing? So, and having, that confidant, that friend. Now, I probably wouldn't take investment advice from them, but just being able to share, in terms of expenditure and money management type of tricks, that's where the truth serum is, in terms of being able to sort of have that. So if you do find someone, if someone's listening to this and they do feel like they've got enough emotional trust in their bestie to talk about money and to talk about some of their considerations, that's going to start the conversation where people will say, well, I use a platform, or I use this tool, or I use this. And then that discovery story starts to play itself out. And I think from that point of view, that's our mission. That's part of, moving everyone towards financial peace, and then one day financial contribution.
Yeah, and I think you've sort of touched on it there as well. And I think the trap you can fall into is that if you wait for someone to bring up the conversation to you, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Because it's got a taboo and it's got a stigma about it and all that sort of stuff.
Correct.
I found the result is a lot better if you share a little bit about yourself first, then people will then feel comfortable enough to share it back with you. So
Beautiful.
If you can sort of, do you walk around and tell everyone your income? No. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely, you've got to sort of feel your way with it. But I personally, especially, me and my partner, we openly discuss it now, and we're very sort of early on to our relationship, but you've got to lead sometimes. You've got to lead with a little bit first, see how it's received, and then sort of move from there. And I think that stigma will sort of dissipate. In my social circle, I'm pretty fortunate in that people feel comfortable talking to me about their scenarios and things like that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Am I offering investment advice? Absolutely not. That's what you guys are there for. You guys are the knowledgeable ones in that aspect. But I can definitely sort of relay a few sort of things I've gone through and things to be aware of. And I think that's sort of the best way to approach it. So I think if anything, especially for anyone that's listening, if lead with something a little bit from yourself and see what sort of reception you get first, and then maybe that'll break the wall down and off you go.
I think it's smart. I think if you lead with expenses too, Adam, because everyone's generally happy to talk about their expenses.
Yeah.
And if you can then create a community of people that are all saying, well, instead of catching up at that restaurant, why don't we catch up at this place or someone's house? And all of a sudden there's some collective energy around everyone having the same goal of minimising their expenses. So ultimately they can trap some more surplus. So I think that's good. Hey, Adam, you've got all the ingredients for success. This conversation has been a real treat for us because you're articulate, you're open, you're transparent, you're authentic. So there's been so many things that you've been sharing that I think a lot of people will benefit from. You've got a time horizon. You're good with money. You've got an investment focus. But I put the call out a couple of times throughout the year. Come and join us on the summer series. Come and join us on the winter series. And I'm sure a bunch of people hear that and say that'd be nice. You even told us a bit about the sleep tax before we push record, that last night you were feeling a bit toey, but all of a sudden you had a really great sleep. But, it's not easy doing what you did, sharing all the details. So why did you respond? What was it about your story that you felt when that call came out that you think, I think this particular part of my story will help the most?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily about sort of sharing my own experience in that, in the hope that it would inspire as such. It was more just, you guys are very good to the community. I wanted to sort of give back a little bit. So, I've sort of sat on the sidelines long enough for the last probably 7 or 8 years and just listened to you guys. And without you realizing it as well, you helped me negotiate some really challenging times that I sort of went through. And I think that if you can be open about it and give back a little bit, and this was sort of my way, especially to you guys and to the community, I've been very fortunate. I've run into the odd TPC person as well that's sort of brought it up and said, I listen to them too as well. So I just sort of wanted to get back involved and give back a little bit, because you guys, you've been very good in helping and framing my financial future. And it was about sort of, there might be someone out there that sort of says, what, that's probably fair. I'm in that boat. I've taken a lot of information for free over the years. It probably wouldn't hurt to then share some of the experiences I've gone through for your podcast, so that, if there is someone out there that's sort of navigating their way through a divorce, and that I can help them like you guys helped me, then that's awesome. Then that also helps as well. But it's about giving back, and I think that's important. You've got to sort of share. It's all good to receive, but sometimes you've got to give as well to sort of make the world go round a little bit, and that was what it was for me.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
Now, my final question for you, Adam, is around money hacks.
Yep.
Obviously, with someone who is focused on what you're doing, we've got the bolognese sauce story, and bolognese as a meal.
Yep.
In bulk. What are some of the interesting things that you've adopted that you found to be quite beneficial in terms of how you're able to manage your money and make some of those additional surplus savings?
Yeah, I think it's about, for me, it was always just sort of trying to have an open mind. So I never really I never went into any given scenario with like, right, this is how I'm going to do it and this is how it's going to work. Because in being so rigid, you lose a lot of opportunity. So, for instance, when I moved out of mum and dad's, I moved into, for instance, I had my nan has a property that wasn't being used because it was essentially at the point where you couldn't rent it out because it would be like a slum. But she also no longer needed it, so she'd moved into a facility. She'd moved in with my auntie, where she lives there. And I just looked at the house and I thought, I reckon with a bit of elbow grease, you could probably get that to enough of a living standard that I would be comfortable in, but you definitely couldn't rent it out. Like, it's one of those things. So I'm pretty lucky in that, a lot of my friends had trades and things like that. So we managed to whip it together enough that I've managed to live here for a few years on the cheaper side. And then same sort of thing. Did I see myself having a housemate? Absolutely not. But then a friend of mine got into a tough predicament, and I sort of said, hey, if you come along, throw a little bit in for bills and things like that, and we're off and racing. And I've managed, by just trying to think outside the square a smidge, I've managed to sort of find things that have helped just accumulate a little bit more savings in just weird pockets of things, rather than being super rigid in what I had to do.
Yeah. You're a good human, Adam. I think the fact that's testament to the fact that you want to give back and help other people. The fact that you want to help your mate out and just throw a few bills in, and I mean the conversation we've had has been broad. From divorce to Vegas to how you navigate divorce to sleep tax to goals around property. So we are very humbled by the feedback, and we are very excited by the messages that you've been able to share. So. On behalf of everyone here on the Property Couch, Adam, thanks for coming on today.
No, I appreciate it, and thanks for your time, and keep going, boys. I'm loving the podcast, and the footy banter's welcome on this side of the fence, so keep it up, and I'm looking forward to many more episodes from you guys.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
Well, there you go, Ben. I must admit, I could have kept chatting for a long time with Adam because he was articulate and considered and thoughtful and takes responsibility and has a really good future ahead of him. But just a really good chat, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of the notes that I made whilst we were chatting was really around he's got everything going in the right direction. So there's nothing like, we always talk about taking action, but to take action, you've got to put some frameworks and some functions and processes in place. He's doing all of that. So his foundations in which he's building on are really great. And obviously he's been very fortunate through the foundations that he's had from his parents and the lessons that he's had from talking about money around the dinner table. So there was conversation to be had there. And so there was an awareness around money. That doesn't mean that if you haven't had awareness around money, that doesn't give you an exit, and a reason for an excuse. It basically just shows you can build on that. And so, that was my first observation, that the foundations are really strong. So that is just about keep on keeping on. Everything that he keeps doing, time will be his friend. Compounding return will be his friend. And there's been a big life lesson that's been learned in regards to a relationship breakdown. And so what we got demonstrated there was a really high level of emotional intelligence. Now, a lot of us struggle in this space. I know when I was in my early 20s, I really lacked a lot of EQ. But going through a relationship breakdown or just any type of friendship challenges that you might have, there's always two sides to the story, and then taking ownership and understanding the position and perspective of the other person will just make it a little bit easier. There's nothing worse than hearing or getting feedback of someone saying it's all their fault. This is the reason why we're in this situation. It's their actions. There's always two sides to the story. And so if you can have that awareness, life will be pretty good for you.
Man, life's just about sharing stories, right? So I just get an enormous amount of joy out of just learning about the backstory, understanding how the money was going, then talking about how, we saved money, and then talking about how we saved the properties. I just think that understanding mum and dad, seeing that he's, middle child and how that's impacting the decisions that we're making, and the overseas holidays that were Philippine that ended up going to Vegas, and, being able to sleep better. I just love it. It's a self-indulgent part of our podcast journey, Ben, where we just get to hear these people that we've had the good fortune of having some influence and some impact on, and Adam was very, very generous with that. So he's on a mission to build up portfolio of properties, on a mission to work hard and create a side hustle so that there's dual income when currently there's not dual income in the household. And obviously got that taste of travel, which means that over time, building up this portfolio will hopefully allow him and his future family to unlock that. So just so much really good stuff there, and brave people who come on to the winter series and just talk about their stuff, Ben. I'll never get sick of it. Never ever will I get sick of it.
No, the fact that he wanted to give back, and that's his motivation. Obviously, having listened from 2015 from around episode 20, so he's done the whole catalogue and he's got the value of all of that knowledge in terms of being able to do that. And so, obviously he was very thankful for us. Well, look, at the end of the day, we're just the guides. Ultimately, it's the decisions that our community make that will ultimately get you over the line. We are only here to guide you in the right direction, to minimise the mistakes that you make. You are the heroes of the journey, not us. You are the people that matter. You are the people that we want to make a difference to. And coming back to Adam's story, I mean, his below the line money management systems, and let me explain what below the line means. It's about organising your finances and getting a clear understanding and control of your finances so you can then trap that surplus. And then above the line is the wealth creation part that then comes into play. Because if you've got that surplus, you can make your money work harder for you. And so Adam ticked all of those boxes. And so what I said earlier about keep on keeping on is all that Adam needs to do as he takes this journey of lifestyle by design. So all credit to him, and ultimately we're happy to have played a little role, but at the end of the day, ultimately it's Adam and all of our community who take action that are real heroes in this story.
Well done, Adam. We appreciate that, and I just want to hopefully talk to the person that was inspired by that story and thought, there might be something in my story that I could share with the community. And I just want to encourage you to think about that, because we're into winter series now, Ben, but later on in the year we're going to put a call out to get you to share some stories around summer series. And in talking to the people in advance around winter series, Ben, they get nervous because they think, is there anything in my story that will actually benefit? Because they're too close to it, right? But it's just the decision making, it's just the thought processes, it's just how you navigate. It's because, as to your point before, success is boiled down to your ability to take action. And so if you're hearing other people, what the steps that they put to take action, what was the next pebble they put in the creek to get to the other side so they can get across safely, those are the things that really matter. So if you're hearing this and getting a little rising in your belly to think, maybe that might be for me, please let us know in some way. We will do a call out later for summer series as well, but don't let that feeling go. Let us know. Reach out to us and we'll make sure that we make a note of that so that you and I can have a conversation with them later in the year, Ben. But I'm excited, mate. I know you are. We love having those conversations. So until next week, mate.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Action. See you next week, folks.